Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're doing Legend of Korra Season 4, Episode 7, Reunion. So, I guess titular reunion is referring to Korra and Asami, clearly, because why would anyone ever name an episode about Korra and Mako being back together, because they're terrible. And this episode kind of demonstrates that problem really well, because they immediately get on each other's nerves. And in so doing, they get on the audience's nerves. I find they're sniping at each other, and for that matter, Korra and Asami sniping at each other, really annoying. I feel like, in particular, the way Asami snapped at Korra, I can sort of understand that if she's nervous about her father. Is nervous the right word? If she's uncertain either about how her friends will take her starting to reconnect with her father, or whether it's a good idea, or if maybe, Korra hit some of Asami's own concerns about it. I can understand Asami coming back hard like that, but it just seems really unusual for Asami, who's always been, the level-headed one of the group, really. So that was a little off, I felt. And of course, anytime Korra and Mako are on screen together, they are annoying. Because basically the only two modes of relating to each other they have are angry and sugary, sweet, syrupy, kissy face. They kind of feel like a 12-year-old's idea of what young people dating is like. It's very either or, very black and white. There's never any sign of them actually, liking each other or being friends or any of that really with the two of them. They just kind of hate each other, except for a brief period where they made out. And I really don't care for it. Already I kind of don't like Mako. I think he's basically a jerk. And he brings out Korra's inner jerk, because, she has a pretty strong jerkish streak at times, too. And so, whenever the two of them are on screen together, it becomes a show about two jerks not liking each other very much. And while that's a good premise for a comedy, I'm not sure it works well when there's no jokes. That pretty much sums up that line. Korra reunited with Naga, which would be great if Naga were, a character that I cared about. Appa was awesome. Appa was a great character. Appa had personality. Naga is just kind of big and quiet and doesn't do much. One of the things I liked about Appa was that he avoided that thing that happens in a lot of fiction where, like, a horse gets treated like a car instead of like a living thing with a personality of its own. I feel like Naga is basically just Korra's... I feel like you could replace Naga with a bike and the series would basically be the same. And Appa wasn't anything like that. Pabu has personality. Naga, I just feel... Maybe it's just because Naga wasn't around much for so much of this season, and honestly, most of second and third season. But I just feel like Naga doesn't have much character. So, meh. I really wish there were more Tenzin in this season, but oh well, he got a line, which is nice. Okay, he got maybe 3 lines. The main other than the ending, which I'll get to, the main interesting thing to happen in this episode was what was going on with Bolin and Varric, who make a really fun duo because Bolin, like Julie, like anyone who has to spend a lot of times around Varric, is basically done with him really quickly. But, unlike Julie, who continues to take it, Bolin does not play the long-suffering butler role the way Julie does. He's not Jeeves. He's Bolin. He speaks his mind, for better or for worse. And so he starts telling Varric off. He'll do the stuff Varric asks because Bolin is a little bit of a wimp, but ultimately, even his good nature has its limits. So, I'm enjoying their dynamic a lot, because they're two people who don't get along very well, but in an entertaining and charismatic way, instead of, just constantly negging on each other, and making grumpy faces. They're actually fun with it. And so we get a little adventure of them with this group of people escaped from the re-education camp, which I'm starting to think we're not going to get to see one, which, on the one hand, honestly, it's just morbid curiosity on my part that makes me want to see it. And it probably would be, there's a term I came up with that I used in discussing my work on My Little Pony, which is pie fight. And it's in reference to an episode where it's dealing with kind of, the Plains Wars when the U.S. committed genocide against Native Americans. And it depicts it as a pie fight because you can't show the genocide of the Native Americans in a cartoon for 4-year-old girls. It was a mistake even to make an episode that tried, because their only options are to either make it utterly horrific and traumatizing and to a level that will probably get the show canceled, or minimize it, and basically insult the memory of the dead. Those were their two options, and they went with the latter. I feel like that's probably what would end up happening if they tried to show one of the Empire's re-education camps, because the real-life use of concentration camps is, horrifying, even when they're not death camps. Normally you say concentration camps, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, the Nazi concentration camps and the slaughter of, the Jews, also Poles, Romani, gay people, the mentally handicapped, and so on. Lots and lots of people being killed. That's not always the case. You can have a concentration camp that isn't a death camp. The U.S. created quite a few of them in World War II for the Japanese Americans. George Takei has some good interviews he did earlier this year talking about those. George Takei, sorry. But it's still a horrific thing to round people up just for their ethnicity, which is exactly what happened here. These people were rounded up because they were not of Earth Kingdom descent, and locked them, and lock them in a camp. It's dehumanizing, it's degrading. Frankly, it's just straight up evil. And yet it's a thing that practically every empire of the modern age has done at some point. The U.S. did it in World War II. They did it before that in the Philippines, the end of the 19th, early 20th century. The British have done it. The Germans, of course, have done it. The Japanese have done it. And to depict it in the show, well, again, there's probably no way they could have done it justice without risking their audience and their advertisers. And so the result probably would have been a pie fight, an insult to the memory of the dead. So it's probably for the best that we just get escapees who allude to how bad it was. So anyway, they escape. We get some really cool fight scenes with mecha versus benders. And the mecha have really come a long way. I like how the mecha in season 2 and 3 were noticeably more advanced and sleeker looking than the ones in season 1, because, you know, those were early initial models and the technology improved over the next couple of years. But now we're a full 5 years later, and the mecha are even more impressively powerful. They're getting scary. You know, a single mech can simulate parts of the capabilities of a lightning bender, a metal bender, and a fire bender. Plus, they're really tough and extremely fast and maneuverable. That's actually probably the most interesting thing about them, is that they're totally untank-like now. They did a lot of dodging in this fight. So they're getting pretty powerful and scary, and it's actually an interesting thing, because what that suggests is ways in which technology is evening things out between benders and non-benders. Which ties us back to, you know, some of the themes of the first season. At the same time, there continue to be problems with the CGs. There was one CG shot that was really janky early in the car chase when Korra, Mako, and Asami are trying to rescue Prince Wu. It was really, really obvious that it was CG. They need to work on that. There's not a lot of series left. It's a recurring problem they've had ever since Avatar: The Last Airbender. But it's really getting bad the last couple of episodes. Like, there's been a lot of CG, and a lot of it has been on the vehicles really obvious and really just doesn't fit with what's around it. So, that's unfortunate. Other than that, the main thing that I took away from this episode is that Toph is about to lay the smack down on some, Earth Empire soldiers. She is about to kick their asses for coming into her house. Toph at the head of a spirit army could be interesting, but honestly, they've got, 2 airships full of soldiers, maybe a dozen mechs. Toph can take that on her own. She's Toph. Other than that, I think that's about all I got. So, I will see you all next week with the next of these. Talk to you later.